Hello and welcome to this educational session on how Arria's investment commentary capabilities helps with the investment performance reporting process. Natural language generation provides language analytics with advanced computational linguistics to translate data in real time as if spoken or written by the human expert. It's part of a suite of capabilities labeled natural language technologies, processing, querying, understanding, coupled with RPA, deep learning and machine learning, can get us closer to an approximation to how a human might run an end-to-end client reporting value chain process. Our focus today is investment performance commentary. Before we jump into the demo, any asset class, any investment process, any transactional and security level information can be described in investment commentary perspective in up to 3 ways. Something at the very high summary level, such as a fund fact sheet or a board report, all the way through, drilling through to instrument or security level granularity, transactional level, perhaps used internally for investment desk reporting, performance and risk committees, and then generally something in the middle, such as when a CPM or a consultant goes to talk on behalf of your company to an end user. So let's go and see NLG in action. In this example demo where we're talking about an equity portfolio, this visualization layer is simply to illustrate the capabilities. Arria has plug-in capabilities with MicroStrategy, Tableau, Click, Power BI, Microsoft Excel and TIBCO. But to keep us focused here, we're going to select a set of data. The structured data in this example is based on equities. With a hierarchy, we can see securities, industry, sectors and countries. And the 6th file is a market overview file. So we're simulating a process of client reporting that starts with a market overview, then talk about investment performance attribution. Clearly other parts of our value chain can take advantage of this capability. So we load the files. Our file format, our input connection templating is consistent and compatible with all the major custodians and all the major investment products around performance and risk. Clearly, as we go into fixed income, which I'll show later, and internal databases, it can vary. So we work with the client to effectively take a copy of existing data feeds. Nothing net new is needed. So we load the files to allow us to interact with the files. Each of those files is a discoverable component. Our software will discover the data within the files. Here we can see countries, sub-industries and sectors. To illustrate the capability, I'll leave the filters, the configuration parameters on sectors. We can see we can interact, turn sectors on and off, pick and choose. Dynamic groups are created as we're interacting with the data. As soon as I now click on one of the parameter controls to simulate and derive data, it's making a RESTful API call from this visualization presentation layer to Arria Studio and deriving natural language. On the right hand side, we can now see text has appeared. This is the market overview. So it's pre-written word-based type comments on the market, what's happened in the market, written by me, as we can see. And then as I described earlier on, lenses 1, 2 and 3, summary, key drivers and details, security level, something at the highest level and something in between. So this is all now live. So what we're describing here, it talks about the sectors and it's defaulted to top and bottom 3. As we've underperformed in this period, we might want to look at the bottom 5. As it's equity, we're leaving with percentages. If we didn't want any numbers, we turn off the percentage or basis points. The grammar clearly has to change. and therefore most people, given this is often coupled with bar charts or some kind of numbers, you don't need to repeat the numbers that the user can already see. I'll show that in Power BI later on. And as I explained, the narrative models, the NLG narrative models, can now vary and be customized based on how you as an organization describe investment performance. It's unlikely to be the same way I might describe or your peers might describe. So if you like, these are starter kits to illustrate how you might describe things. The first narrative model describes the net effects. As you can see, it's talking about positive allocation, and then it's talking about weaker selection and weaker allocation. If I now change it to primarily talk about allocation, then talk about selection, not simply the net. So now we've got same portfolio, same data, different words in the key drivers. Right? So it's now looking at allocation, weakest allocation, then it's looking at selection. We're often asked, and that's the primary use case, to use automation, use our capability to do the heavy lifting. We will not make mistakes based on the data, based on business rules and conditions, if then else thresholds, word variation. We have many 170 different functions, proprietary algorithms. For example, that is a country adjective, German based, it's Brazilian. A VLOOKUP would pick up Brazil, for example. All of these things are changeable. We're often asked to, once we've described what has happened and when it's happened, why it's happened. So this little difference in color shows the technologies available because we've understood the CDOL QSIP or ISIN. We know what the security is called. We can then go out, use third-party sources. In this example, we're using public information from Bloomberg, Yahoo and Reuters, and picking up some stock stories based on what I'm clicking on. So we start by these ways to describe portfolios called NLG narrative models. Up to 10 different narrative models per asset class, per investment process is a standard offering. So we will generally preset a client-specific formatting using your style guide, interacting with your human, your writers, based on what you've written in the past. We will emulate how writers write, humans write. This then shows you can't change the data, but if you don't like the way we describe things, of course you can interact. You might like to change after the fact, various words, adjectives. You can interact before you go and put it into a third-party client reporting tool, write it to Word, PDF, and consume it in some way, shape or form. These are just give you illustrations on the type of interactiveness you can use NLG for. Continuing the expose and education, here we have now a Power BI online visualization. The exact same type of capability. Now we have the advantage of having visuals and NLG and interactivity at the same time. So the same examples I gave earlier on are described with the first flyby. We're often asked about other languages. We would primarily create the natural language model in native language. We would not use translation service. We are compatible with UTF-8 character encoding. However, we primarily code in the language of choice or choices. This example here is in French. Exactly the same capability. Whenever I'm interacting with any of the parameter controls, it'll make a live API call based on the data. So equity is where we generally start. Here we now go from a perhaps common, consistent way of describing things called equity into fixed income. So generally, to start off and help to persuade stakeholders in your organization, we can understand the maths and understand fixed income attribution. We generally show a summary of highlighted numbers that exist from your source data, along with the text at the same time. So we can see here, we underperformed in this portfolio for this month by almost 52 basis, sorry, outperformed by almost underperformed by under 52 basis points. Lifted some of the summary information, replicated it on the left-hand side. Just for example, when we're talking about spreads, to show we're reading the data, that goes to 14 decimal places. To show completeness, Microsoft Excel goes to 12. As we then go in and talk about key drivers, in this example, the overall yield curve effect is 3.5 basis points negative. We're not talking about every single part of the yield curve. The key driver in this period for this portfolio happens to be positioning on the US yield curve, and then we talk about the elements driving that performance underneath spreads and yield curve here. One of the most common things we're asked to help with is in each interactive query into the data for this particular portfolio and this particular suite of analytics and attribution effects. Each time we make an interaction, for example, if I change the date now, I'm looking at 21 million numbers simultaneously. It is very often the case that intuitively the summary numbers don't necessarily agree with the data behind it. So I invite you here to pause the video. That number is very different, definitely lower than that number. However, according to the data, that's an outperformance of 1.1 basis points. You can't outperform when your return is lower than the benchmark. You've underperformed. So here we highlight an alert, a data alert. While I'm here, technically, investment performance commentary is based on performance attribution. An institutional client reporting process almost always talks about some kind of positioning and outlook. We don't actually call that investment commentary, it's actually static data. However, when you're comparing and contrasting one period with another period, in this example again, the fund exposure has been increased. Right? So it's an exposure-based report from a country perspective, and then from a sectoral basis on this portfolio, it's a high yield portfolio based on the categorizations over here, then we're talking about sectors. So again, the different ways to describe things can change, can iterate. Each of these narrative models changes depending on how I'm interacting with the data. All live, all on the fly. There's now different words because I've changed the narrative model. Carrying on, now we're looking at multiple asset classes, multi-funds, multiple asset classes. So there's a number of sub-funds in this portfolio. To start us off, we're just also aggregating the number of portfolios that have outperformed or underperformed. Often we're asked to bring in peer group information at this point. Now what we have is the option to look through each of the portfolios in this multiple fund report. Talk about the equity component of portfolios. So in this global growth fund, we clearly have fixed income and various regions. So we're talking about the information within an asset allocation process and describing things as we normally do for multi-assets using a Brinson type model. So we're talking about the fixed income return. Clearly we can see if we're using the visual, that's the biggest relative contributor for the period, so unsurprisingly it's at the top. And in this example, we're now showing the same type of capability, but we're describing the portfolio from two different NLG narrative models at the same time. Net effects, allocation followed by security. So you can actually see, you could create a dashboard using your chosen presentation layer across the portfolio and talk about the same portfolio in up to 10 different ways simultaneously at the same time. Unlimited number of parameters, unlimited number of visuals. Use the presentation BI layer to its best capability. And so in summary, these are the business problems that our customers have been asking Arria to help to solve for. No longer the need to go sequentially through a client reporting value chain, use technology, use natural language generation to remove resource heavy, low value activities of the data preparation, allowing humans to add value. Up to 10 different ways to describe the same portfolio or portfolios. Normally 5 levels of hierarchy is comfortably enough to describe an investment process for external client reporting. Collaborate on business rules, conditions, thresholds, logical parameters, your own specific formatting style, a style guide, your way of writing. We can emulate that. No limit on AUM, number of words, number of API calls. We do not store or persist any data with an API engine pass through. Some customers take advantage of building an interactive API-based call to Arria. All the control remains with you. So you pull in language chunks, API calls for the various parts of the investment commentary you would like a comment on. Others take advantage of Arria Academy and learn Arria Studio and our proprietary articulate text language, ATL. That's a language based on Python with Lambda expressions. It's a close approximation to how Studio gives the capability into your hands, allowing you, if you wish, to buy our capabilities to build solutions yourself. Thank you for watching.